Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the Biomass Magazine podcast. I am your host, Anna Simet. Today, we're going to talk about biochar, and we're going to get some great insight from today's guest. We have Jason Dodier of Grain Ecosystem. Jason, hello, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to continue the dialogue from the International Biomass Conference.
Yes, absolutely. It was great to have you there. You were presenting on the innovation stage, didn't you?
I did, and I got to tell you, I love that setup. I thought it was really inclusive and engaging, and our booth got flooded after that, which was equally
I saw the crowd. I saw the crowd. It was awesome. Well, I'm glad you had a good experience, Jason. So people are probably wondering what we're talking about. Why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about your background and Grain Ecosystem?
I'm happy to do it. I think perspective-wise, my ethos has always been rooted in you don't need to have all the answers, just the courage to stay in the room. And I think that was what was really impressive about the conference as well. People stayed, they were engaged. I got to tell you, I've gone to a lot of conferences and I haven't had that level of engagement and experience. I don't think we stopped the whole time. And it aligns with kind of my thought process. I started my journey via an acquisition with Schneider Electric back in 2007, 2008. They had acquired a data center company I was part of. And at the time, it takes real leadership in this space. So I had early mentors. I admired the then CEO and chairman, Jean-Pascal Tricoire, but it was my first real exposure to the power of scale, not just for growing companies, but for accelerating global solutions. I looked at concepts like power usage effectiveness, and that got me thinking about how do we maximize system inputs and outputs? And that was an early influence in terms of how I approach complex problem solving and sustainable solutions. And part of my career that maybe not a lot of people know is I spent a lot of time living and working in Middle East, Africa, and Europe. So I spent about 8 years of my career in that region. And I worked on a lot of things from data centers to digital energy to grid modernization and climate aligned infrastructure. And that helped me also in the journey coming back to the US to lead the energy as a service space. But the core experience that helped me get to where I am today was really working on the access to energy program at Schneider Electric. And that program gave me incredible opportunities to work across those regions around circular economy. And to date, that program, the goal was to reach 100 million underserved people that don't have access to electricity. To date, it's already helped deliver clean energy to over 50 million people globally and supported 10,000 plus energy entrepreneurs. And I think we've trained more than 1 million individuals in sustainable energy practices. So that was the really how I got to be where I am today, working on these projects. I worked on one of the largest public-private partnerships in the US, the JFK Terminal 1 project. But then you talk about Grain Ecosystem, which I'm proud to be a co-founder of today, and what brought me to the conference. During the pandemic, my co-founders and I were asking a tough question, and it was really along the lines of, what if we brought the same structure and investment grade rigor to carbon removal that we bring to energy infrastructure? And that really led to the formation of Grain, which I'll go into a bit deeper, but it was sparked by this internal innovation challenge at Schneider Electric, where we set out to reimagine the carbon market, starting with biochar, which is it's basically a science-backed but under-leveraged solution for carbon sequestration, soil restoration, and circular value creation. So launched in 2022. It's been a very long journey, but that's a little bit about who I am, how we came to be, and some of the early milestones that got Grain in position to lead in this market.
Wow, that's a great story. You're a well-traveled dude, aren't you?
Very fortunate. I get to tell you, it helped me in terms of perspective and in terms of independence. I really encourage folks that grow up here in the U.S. and spend time. I grew up in the smallest state, Anna, so Rhode Island.
Which state? Oh, okay.
The great state of Rhode Island, which we just hosted the second annual Rhode Island Climate Stocktake. So getting out of your comfort zone and having international experiences, there's no secondary supplement to that.
Great. I can totally relate because I grew up in rural North Dakota, so not much there. Great state, though.
I've not been to North Dakota. We got to put that on the bucket list.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so Jason, tell us more about Green Ecosystem and how you guys are helping companies who want to offset their carbon emissions. What tools and resources do you guys offer and what makes you guys unique?
So I think that the future doesn't just happen. Obviously, it's built one smart shared decision at a time. And we kind of saw, and by the way, speaking of travel, I lived in France during the Paris Agreement. So
Oh,
kind of
wow.
saw a little bit where the future was going in this space, and there was a shift away from kind of avoidance. So some of the things Grain does is help companies offset their carbon emissions by making carbon removal, especially biochar, as we'll talk about more in detail, credible, verifiable, and scalable. So if we think about the event you just hosted, we're working across forestry, agriculture, and industrial sectors to turn complex climate projects into investable, high-integrity carbon credits backed by science, third-party standards, and of course, financial-grade modeling. So the last role I had before co-founding Grain was on the private equity side. So it's so pivotal how you de-risk and get these projects ready for investors because you only have one shot. And as we often say, obviously you can't scale what you don't trust, and you can't finance what you don't understand. So that's why we provide developers with the full toolkit to go kind of from this concept investor ready life cycle assessment, carbon eligibility reports, and all that stuff. And I think, one last thing I would say is what sets Grain apart is how we unlock and maximize every revenue stream tied to biochar. So if you think about beyond the carbon credits, we help projects capture value from syngas, waste heat through combined heat and power, and certainly clean fuel co-products wherever possible. And then obviously we spend a lot of time in the navigation of incentives, tax credits, premium market opportunities in ag, building materials and filtration. And then we're also a leader when it comes to digital MRV, measurement, reporting, and verification. So automating and standardizing carbon accounting using spatial data, sensors, and analytics. So for me, it's how do we create radical transparency that lowers costs and builds trust with buyers? Verification shouldn't slow projects down. It should accelerate credibility. And one last thing I'll say that I think your listeners would appreciate, proliferation is catalyzed by two forces: demand and the resulting cost decreases, each of which drive technology to become even better and cheaper. So I'll give you one of my favorite examples. As you get more and cheaper technology, it's going to enable new and cheaper technologies downstream. So Uber was impossible without the smartphone, which itself was enabled by GPS, which was enabled by satellites, which were enabled by rockets, which were enabled by combustion techniques, which were enabled by language and fire. It's really that simple. But if you follow that trajectory, it's a really exciting time to be creating solutions to accelerate the biomass industry, and that's what we're trying to do.
Great answer, Jason. So let's dig into biochar a little bit more. It's been talked about in waves. I've been in this industry for 17 plus years. Seems to get really hot, but historically it cools off. It really seems different this time, though. What are your thoughts on that?
We've seen definitely that there has been an ignition in the space. I think about when we were starting Grain, 3+ years ago, and the discussions to today. For us, biochar stands out as a versatile material that is bridging industrial needs with ecological goals. The world is at an inflection point. We have some difficult challenges, reducing emissions while preserving industrial strength and strategic independence. And it's meeting this industrial trilemma that's going to require solutions that generate economic value, support communities, and protect the environment. So for us, and what we're seeing is biochar is a very compelling part of the solution. So by pyrolyzing sustainable biomass, you're able to replace coal in industries that are hard to decarbonize. You can enrich soils or building materials, securely locking away carbon for the long term. And what we're seeing, particularly across Europe, is that biochar production has proven to be sustainable and technologically mature and economically viable. And what we're trying to do, obviously the bulk of Grain's work is here in North America. We are trying to help with that evolution to move faster. With installed capacity growing and more projects underway, we think that biochar is going to be playing an increasing role in the green future of this country. In 2025, market demand has grown across ag, aggregates, industrial processes, and fuel application. And what's working today, Anna, is strategies centered on long-term offtake agreements with structured pricing, maintaining inventory for premium markets, rigorous testing and labeling to ensure batch consistency. And I think the European market is a great sign. I'll leave you with this on the question you asked. The European market is signaling where we're headed in the U.S. Biochar producers there are evolving into charcoal producers. So they're supplying products that simultaneously enable carbon sequestration in ag and are replacing fossil fuels. And for perspective, according to Biochar Europe, Europe currently has an installed biochar production capacity of roughly 324,000 tons per year and another 180,000 tons expected by 2026. So if we can get behind this diverse landscape and help drive scale of the technology, the four main dimensions, production scale, business models, location strategies, and biochar applications, it bodes really well for the North America market based on, again, the pipeline, the dialogue, and the narrative coming out of Europe. So those are some of the things that we're observing and seeing as it relates to the momentum behind the biochar market.
So, okay, I was going to ask you about the outlook of the biochar market. You pretty much answered that. What about the financing environment? What's that like right now?
So modern biochar technologies have certainly helped to enable decentralized cascading use cases. When we think about financing, we look at how many revenue streams as well. Is the project producing heat, power, fuels alongside carbon-rich materials that align with local land use practices and complement intermittent renewables like solar and wind? The thing that's very interesting here, and I talked a little bit about it on my TED Talk at your event, the market specifications for biochar. And I want to highlight this because it goes right into the financing. When you look at pricing, so to give you perspective, agricultural biochar typically contains 60 to 80% fixed carbon and less than 30% moisture. And the prices of that, for those listening that are looking to procure biochar, on average are about $250 per ton, free on board, which is a shipping term used in trade to specify when the responsibility and ownership of goods transfer from the seller to the buyer. Industrial buyers, which expect a higher purity, typically over 85% fixed carbon, we're seeing prices around $500 per ton. Fuel grade biochar, which is a little bit over 90% fixed carbon and low moisture, is commanding about $750 a ton. And then I'm spending a lot of my time trying to unlock premium uses such as filtration. That's over 92 to 95% fixed carbon and low ash. And we've seen prices, Anna, reach as high as $2,200 per ton. So if you contrast that, aggregate markets accept lower quality, typically 60% fixed carbon and moisture up to 60%, but it's about 50 to 200 per ton. Now, when you think about financing, a big challenge we continue to see across these segments is the lack of standardization. The term ton is often ambiguous, with many buyers using volume to weight estimates rather than actual mass. So definitions of biochar also vary widely, and sales cycles are complex. So think about this. Globally, when you think about investments, steel, silicon, and other metals consume about 1 billion tons of metallurgical coal annually and are producing about 3 billion tons of CO2, or 8% of global emissions. And steel, which is the foundation of modern economies, currently has a global production of roughly 2 billion tons per year and about 3.6 billion tons of emissions. So looking at that big picture, we are seeing a large demand for financing of carbon removal credits tied to those applications, offtake tied to those applications because of the massive amount of carbon that's being emitted. And then this increasing demand is lowering the risk for investors and technology developers, and it's strengthening the case for decentralized biochar deployment, and it's going to build resilience in supply chains. As we all remember, during the pandemic, we are going from a just-in-time to a just-in-case supply chain. So we have the biomass potential and policy momentum to enable the transformation. Now alignment is needed among industrial demand, land use strategy, and targeted investments. And ultimately, as it comes to investment, biochar production is more than a technology. It truly is a gateway to replacing linear fossil-based value chains with a decentralized, nature-based circular economy and paving the way for holistic carbon management. And I think that what I'm seeing from investors today, obviously with grain, we're working across the capital stack. This is the largest demand we've ever had for biochar carbon credits. Part of that, as you know, Anna, is direct air capture hasn't delivered in the manner we thought it would from a carbon credit perspective. We are seeing a large demand from a USDA perspective in terms of putting forth debt capital for these projects at favorable rates. We've seen new entrants around short-term debt capital and bridge capital. And obviously a lot of our time at Grain is spent working with both family offices and philanthropic capital institutions, because we desperately need concessionary and bridge money that can help these projects grow and take on some of that risk up front. So it's a very interesting time, but keep a very close eye on investors that are looking at the metallurgical space, because this is how Europe and the US are going to hit our net zero goals and deliver carbon dioxide removal at scale.
Really great answer, Jason. Very thorough and full of some awesome stats. You just hammered those out.
It's my job to know it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. My last question is, we see a lot of biochar startups at our events. What are the major pieces of advice that you would give them to get to that road to success?
Like yourself, Anna, we're seeing real momentum in the biochar space, obviously. And to stand out and succeed, startups need to go beyond just producing char. So I'm going to answer the question in two. There's two ways to answer this, because you have entrepreneurs that are looking to do biochar projects, and then you've got entrepreneurs that are digitizing and doing other elements of the stack. So let me talk first about entrepreneurs that are looking to build solutions, hard tech, etc. One of the most important things for those kind of entrepreneurs is to anchor their business model in a real demand, and ideally leverage a solution, for example, like grain, and come to conferences like the International Biomass Conference so that you can set the stage for readiness. Because if the foundation is shaky, the structure cannot stand. It's one of the reasons with grain we launched a jobs to be done platform, so we can help startups figure out what they need to do to maximize the odds of success. Too many teams, Anna, focus on building technology without securing buyers or demonstrating product market fit, whether in carbon markets, agriculture, or industrial applications. That's essential. Plus, you've got to think about it. It's critical to design the approach around co-benefits. So if you are a startup looking to do biochar projects, the most impactful projects that we have seen be successful create multiple forms of value at once, whether it's waste reduction, energy generation, carbon sequestration, local job creation. That's how you unlock funding and political support to do your projects. One last piece for the hard tech and the project developer entrepreneurs, being data-driven is critical. So investors and crediting bodies expect transparency and compliance with standards like Vera, Puro. So if you can work with solutions that help build strong monitoring and reporting, that's going to help you to bolster and unlock the projects. Now, for the other subset of startup, maybe that aren't looking to build projects or create technology, you should build regionally with a global mindset. So, because of this space is inherently local, you have to have a good understanding of, from a digital perspective, what are the different feedstocks and land use applications and agile, flexible things you can do to be able to land and expand. And how do you negotiate? This is a team sport. We have not been playing like a team in the way that I would like to see us play like a team. So who are the vital partnerships, whether they be landowners, tech providers, policymakers? One of the cool things about us at Grain is we partnered with Schneider Electric early, which was Time Magazine's most sustainable company last year, to help work with them to go to large multinationals to help them decarbonize their supply chain. Schneider offers a lot of the tech, the hard tech, and Grain is offering the digital solutions that can then accelerate power purchase agreements, VPPAs, RECs, etc. So the startups that succeed, Anna, will be the ones who bring others along and create shared value.
Love that. Great answer. And I know that we could continue talking about this for probably at least another hour, but anything else that you want to add to kind of wrap things up?
Well, I think that you have to be engaged. And overall, biomass is the oldest source of renewable energy and still one of the most flexible. As we know, it can be burned, fermented, transformed, but above all, it could be a bridge between waste and worth. And I just want to highlight that point because a lot of people will maybe not give the biomass space the time that it needs. We are at an inflection point, and you've got to bring people together in the room to engage appropriately. And if we're going to be successful, Anna, in circular bioeconomy, waste becomes a resource, and biomass is the engine that's going to power regeneration.
Okay, well, that's a great note to end on, Jason. I really want to thank you for coming on to the podcast and chatting with us.
I'm already counting the days down for your next International Biomass event. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, Nashville next time.
Nashville.
Yes.
One of the best.
Yeah, it is. That's for sure. Okay, well, again, Jason, thanks so much. Really enjoyed our chat.
See you soon.
Yep. And to our listeners, this was Jason Dodier with Grain Ecosystem. I sure hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you next time.